And welcome back to another podcast with Mr. Hagan. And on this podcast, we are going to look at our second determinant, which is a change in income. So let's get right at it. My good is going to be cars, and my price is going to be, on my graph, is going to be the price of cars on the vertical axis, and we're going to have the quantity of cars on the horizontal axis. Price of cars on the vertical, quantity of cars on the horizontal. And of course, demand curve for cars, supply curve for cars. Here's our current equilibrium price, our current equilibrium quantity. So maybe cars are selling for, $20,000 for a car, and maybe 50,000 cars are being bought and sold every week, or whatever the number might be. And so the market's just cruising along in equilibrium, at equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity, until something changes, until we get a real world event. So let's say my real world event is the United States, for whatever reason, enjoys an increase in economic growth, an increase in economic growth, an increase in economic growth. So the economy starts to grow, and that means that people are going to be making more money. So now what I have to do is I have to go look at my list of demand determinants. We listed those on the previous video, and I try to find the demand determinant that matches up with this real world event. And I'm going to say that determinant is going to be a change in income. It's going to be a change in consumer income. As the United States economy starts to grow, as we enjoy increased economic growth, people's incomes are going to begin to rise. As their incomes rise, they're going to want to buy more cars. And so that's going to cause the demand curve to shift to the right. That is going to cause the demand curve to shift to the right. So let's show that on the graph. The demand curve shifts to the right. So there's my increase in demand. Demand curve shifts to the right. When it does, we find our new equilibrium. Consumers are going to be out there demanding more cars. That's going to bid up the price of cars, and it's going to increase the quantity of cars trading in the market. The quantity of cars trading in the market is going to go up. That is to say, people will be buying more cars and selling more cars. We record that over here in our model. Increase price, increase quantity. So if the economy starts to grow, you can expect to see car prices to go up and the quantity of cars buying and selling to go up as well. What happens here? That increase in quantity, remember, we've got to give that increase in quantity two names down here. The increase in quantity is called two things. On the demand side, it's called an increase in demand because the demand curve shifted to the right. So it's an increase in demand. On the supply curve, it's called an increase in quantity supplied. How do I know? I know because the supply curve didn't shift. We moved along the supply curve. As quantity increase, we're moving along the supply curve, and that's called an increase in quantity supplied. An increase in quantity supplied. So that, remember, that quantity is getting two names: increased demand, increased quantity supplied, which is another way of saying people are buying more cars and people are selling more cars than they did before. So again, we have a rule for this. My rule is this. My rule is anytime you get an increase in income, that's going to cause the demand curve to shift to the right. That's what happened in our example. Or you get a decrease in income, and that will cause the decrease in income will cause the demand curve to shift to the left. We did not do that example, but it'd be the same thing, only the opposite direction. The demand curve would shift into the left. So you should be beginning to see how economists do these models. We get a good defined, we get a real world event, and then we match up a determinant with that real world event, shift the curve, and then say what happens to price and quantity. That's the goal. That's what we're trying to do. This has been another podcast with Mr. Hagan, and we'll see you on the next podcast.